Okay, and I want to officially welcome you to our session PBIS in the virtual classroom. It's going to be led by Stephanie Denham and Heidi Kurczynski. And again, we're welcoming not only all of our participants, we're so happy to have you all here, but a handful of district folks who are going to share with us some practices that they've developed over in the last couple of weeks and months to help implement PBIS in our new virtual environment. So Heidi and Stephanie,
Thanks, Janine. So we would like to again welcome everyone to our PBIS in the virtual classroom session today. We are really excited that we've seen so many, we're seeing so many folks on our screens here. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in. So we do have a bit.ly for you. The presentation that you're going to see with live links is available. It is a bit.ly. It's called PBIS in virtual classroom. So I'll give you guys a minute to type that in if you want to kind of follow along on your own computer. And again, that's something that you could, and I think we could probably put that in the chat box too. If that's something,
yep, I just put it in there.
Great, thanks, Janine. That's something that you can refer back to after today as well. So you will have access to there's some live links that we wanted to share with you, as well as some examples that we wanted to share with you. So that'll be there. Janine, could you advance for me? So Janine started this morning with an activity called Rose and Thorn. And what we are making an attempt at here is trying to do a little bit of a virtual check-in, a little bit of a restorative practice. So check-in. And I noticed in the chat box that most people really were roses this morning. There were a couple thorns, I think, that I saw. I know John had said he's waiting for his data to come in, so he's not quite sure if he's a rose or a thorn, although he was seeming to be a rose. And so we want to just remind you that during this time of, we're going to be talking about virtual learning today and connecting with your kids virtually, that there are ways to connect with them either through a restorative practice or just daily check-ins with kids, that you can still continue to do that. Now, it's not going to be the same as seeing them face to face, but there are ways to do that. And we kind of wanted to model that. We wanted to kind of model that this morning. If you could advance for me, Janine. So we learned this technique at our restorative practices training, continuum of restorative practices training with our presenter that you see pictured there. Her name is Stephanie Martinez. So in January, we had her come out and she spent 2 days with us and many teams from the region. And we really talked about what does the continuum of restorative practices look like, all the way from a simple restorative conversation, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which would be reintegration procedures when students are put out of their environment and have to be welcomed back in, and everything in between. And so we had a great 2 days with her. And then in April, she came back with us virtually and did a follow-up of that, where she talked about the same things that we talked about over those 2 days. But in addition, what kinds of things can you do in a virtual environment? And so what she did for us is she did the Rose and Thorn activity to show, even if you're in a virtual environment, you can check in with your kids in a virtual circle. Although it's not a physical circle, you can still check in and see how they're feeling just by going through that same practice. So that link that you have there is a link to that meeting that we had with her, the follow-up meeting on April 20th. So if you click on that after the presentation today, you can see the entire follow-up presentation that she spent the morning with us talking about. And so that's something that is there for you as a resource. In addition to that, you'll see another link there called Community Building Questions. Those are some questions that you can actually use in a virtual circle, or even just with checking in with kids. And there's a live link there that if you do want to maybe start this practice or continue this practice with your virtual classroom, there are some really great starter questions that you can use in that link. And before we kind of dive in, this slide is really just a reminder that when we talk about PBIS, I know Stephanie always kind of chuckles at me when I say this, but I always say the framework is the framework is the framework, meaning whatever environment that you're in, you can use the PBIS framework to address either the challenging behaviors that you're seeing or pre-teaching behaviors, the framework works in all situations. So this is a slide from Florida PBIS, and it really talks about what we should be doing in any environment, which is teaching, modeling, practice, and reinforcing, and then error correcting and remaining calm and maintaining relationships. If you look in that inner circle, there are just some prompts for a virtual classroom, meaning everybody got thrown in so fast because of the situation. I don't think anybody really thought about what are our virtual expectations? How are we going to teach routines and procedures in a virtual environment? This slide really just prompts to say, you're not really doing that any differently. You're just making sure that whatever is in your environment, that we're making sure that we have kids understanding what those expectations are, as well as being very purposeful in teaching, practicing, and recognizing them. That's no different than a physical classroom. It's just thinking about things a little bit differently because we're in a different environment. So this is just to remind you that as we have our presenters present today, they have really thought about how are we addressing this through the PBIS framework. And even though the environment may look a little bit differently, the framework doesn't change. We need to be teaching, modeling, practicing, and error correcting as we maintain relationships with students. So as we transition to the next slide, Stephanie's going to pick it up here to kind of get us started with our presenters today.
Good morning, everybody. I have to say, my rose was because we have so many people that have attended. It's nice to see familiar faces. And I can't believe we got almost 40 people on a call in the first week of June. So thank you for being here today. We wanted to give you just a couple of slides on some tips for PBIS and how to maximize your framework during school closure. PBIS research has taught us that the environment surrounding kids are themselves a teacher. And this time of stay-at-home orders and remote instruction is bringing new behaviors to the surface all the time, both those that are appropriate and lovely, and also those that need to be redirected. These kids are demonstrating new behaviors as their time at home increases and the routines for themselves have shifted. Kids are also demonstrating new behaviors because learning online is new to most of them and new to most of us and their teachers. So this is a time for teaching and reinforcing the behaviors that we expect and that we want to see. Regardless of their age, children are trying to make sense of these new rules and realities. We can and should be learning what you know about PBIS and leaning into that for help. So here are some tips. So the first one you see on the screen here is prompt, teach, and reinforce, and that will not be surprising to any of you that have heard us speak about PBIS in the past. So these new prevention measures, such as frequent hand washing, coughing into the crook of your sleeve, all of these things that we have been practicing can be linked directly to your school-wide expectations. You should use that language that your students are familiar with. Make sure all your staff are teaching these strategies. Make sure staff are creating new routines to make sure that they incur and that they are built into the daily schedule. And reinforcing the habits that keep students, staff, and families healthy. The second one is probably most important in the current context and landscape that we're seeing in our world today is emphasize respect. From the onset of COVID, and even more so in the recent days and weeks, individuals from groups are being harassed based on perceived race or their origin. Reteach, prompt, reinforce this respectful behavior. And really observing what our students are saying and what how they're interacting with each other. If comments reflect a lack of understanding or bias, providing factual information to counteract that is very helpful and critical. Promote that the sense of community and respect for each other that all students deserve is part of the classrooms and schools that you are leading. The next tip that we have is support and engage families to use these similar prompting, language, and teaching at home. After weeks at home, every family can likely predict tough situations or times of the day. This is an opportunity to really get ahead of it and remind kids the expectation before those times occur. And to acknowledge them when they are showing those appropriate behaviors, as tired as all of us at home may be with our children. And the final tip we have is know that everyone may be reacting to this unprecedented time very differently. We all should be monitoring students and use your existing school referral process to identify any students that are especially anxious about the situation. We have students that are not engaging with online learning. We have students that are not showing up virtually or responding to calls. And so really being aware of who those students are and identifying them for additional support is critical. A personalized video message from a favorite teacher or a small group time with a school-based mental health provider may help to teach some of those students new coping strategies during this time. The next slide is really to look at your framework. Every PBIS framework uses this matrix of expected behaviors as the foundation. And so using this matrix can be just as effective online as it is in your brick and mortar building. Just because kids these days are usually spending a lot of time online doesn't mean that they won't struggle with this new format of remote instruction. The software is different for them, or a lot of kids have learned misrules about how to interact online due to gaming or social media platforms. So it's critical that everyone gets on the same page and that we define, teach, practice the behaviors that we want students to perform. So this slide is a couple of steps to do so and how to really take your existing building matrix and stretch it into the new online platform or a hybrid learning experience as your buildings kind of prepare for fall, whatever that might look like. So the first is to keep those same school-wide behavior expectations. Kids will benefit from hearing that consistent language when so many other things in their lives have changed. But instead of using locations around your building, like hallway, classroom, use those online activities as your setting. So consider possible activities like teacher-led instruction. What are they going to be doing during small group activities? And write in those expected behaviors, especially for any certain apps that are going to be used. It's also critical to think through routines that have existed in the actual physical classroom and what they can look like online, how that transfer looks. So for example, if your routine before was to walk into the classroom and complete some bell work that was written on the board, now students can use the chat feature perhaps in an online format to respond while an entry activity is shared on the screen as students log in, similar to what you guys experienced with that rose and thorn that we set up today. Any of the behaviors that are specific to virtual instruction should also be explicitly reviewed and taught. Teachers should plan if students will be required to have video on at all times or only during certain activities. What expectations for the chat feature are, such as are private chats allowed? These expectations can and should be taught in their own lesson, and then of course practiced and reinforced during other lessons that are focused on specific academic content. This new time has cause for new skills for all of us. Explicit teaching and frequent practice will be needed to do these skills with fluency. So we have provided a lot of tips, and that link on the bottom of your screen now are more tips relating to how to stretch your matrix, and also provides a sample matrice for both elementary and secondary that is pretty good. So we've included that link, and we also have a resource page that we'll get to at the last section of this hour with you that we can that you can kind of click through and see additional resources. So Heidi and I just wanted to give you some thoughts to kind of ground our thinking today, but we also know that through this pandemic, the quick switch to remote instruction was new for all of us, and we are all in this together. And so we have invited some of our districts, 4 of them, to share with us now the thoughts of what PBIS actually looks like in the virtual classroom. We know that online research and tips are helpful, but we really wanted to give everybody a chance to hear from people that are in the field and also share and ask questions of each other. So we gave them the questions on the slide as kind of a springboard for their thoughts. So the first one is, what's on your mind right now as it relates to PBIS and student behaviors overall? What are considerations for families, students, and teachers in this virtual environment? How has your matrix evolved during virtual learning? How are you teaching, reinforcing, redirecting expectations during online learning? And what is the lesson learned that you could take with you into fall? We know that this is that weird time of year where people are wrapping up, but also planning for what may be a very uncertain start to the new school year. And so your response to any of those questions, team, will be really helpful to kind of get us going. So we will now hear from first Greenwood Early Learning Center in Green, then Miller Elementary in Aurora, Memorial Elementary in Brunswick, and Streetsboro Middle. So we've given you preschool through secondary. And we're going to kind of just kick it over. So each team, please monitor your own time. What we're planning for this next section is about 5 minutes, and then we're going to open it up through the chat box and microphones for any reactions and questions from our bigger group. So you'll have 5 minutes. When it's your turn to speak, please turn your video on so we can see your faces. And the rest of us, as we're kind of listening for that first 5 minutes, just jot down some of your own notes or get ready, because at the end of that 5 minutes, we're just going to open it up for any questions or compliments for the groups that are presenting. Okay, so without further ado, our first group is going to share from Greenwood Early Learning Center.
Hi guys, I'm Erica Bauer. I'm the school counselor at Greenwood Early Learning Center, and I'm so happy to be here. I'm really proud. I think my first reaction is I'm just really proud of our teachers and our families through this time. They've really rallied, and we've noticed that the expectations kind of seamlessly went home. One of the very first things we did is started posting things on our website and sending emails out with matrix for at-home remote learning and the expectations. I'm sure many of you experienced the joys of trying to transition students to virtual learning and muting mics and figuring out the video and all of that. As you know, we as adults were still learning how to do it, and then we're teaching 5- and 6-year-olds in our building to do that. So we quickly decided as a district and as a building to create matrix for remote learning for parents to use as a guide to help them and for our students. So I don't know how handy I am at sharing my screen. I'm going to give it a whirl. If it doesn't work, we'll just move on quickly. Oh, it looks like I might not be able to do that.
Erica, it's Janine. Give me just a second and let me see if I can give you that control.
Okay, no problem. I'll keep
So,
chatting.
actually, let me think through this. If I give you control, you would be moving our slides.
It's no big deal. I can even email you, Janine, the matrix we made, and if you want to share them with everyone.
That would be perfect. Let's do that.
Okay. So anyways, we created a matrix for our same expectations: be safe, be kind, be responsible, and wanted students to know how to do that at home. So being a preschool and kindergarten building, we explicitly teach everything constantly all year. And so we knew we needed to give parents directions on how to continue that. It was really neat and just a heartwarming thing to see in our parade that our staff did. Not only did our staff put expectations on their "we miss you" signs to the students, but a lot of our students were writing on their cars and posters, "Bulldog Strong, be safe, be kind, be responsible." So those expectations have really become part of our culture at Greenwood and across our district. So it was just really great to see that the hard work we've been putting in with this is paying off, and people are latching on to that right now, especially during this tough time. The other thing that we have just most recently done is put together a summer social emotional learning calendar. It's just a 5-day calendar, and it gives parents ideas of ways to check in with their kiddos across the summer. So for example, Monday is Make Me Happy Monday. And so they have to think of something they could do to be kind to someone at their home or in whatever their summer setting may be. Talk to Me Tuesday, we gave a couple tips on how they could start a conversation, or how parents could start a conversation and really listen to one another. Use Your Words Wednesday is using things like bug and a wish to express yourself and practicing that. And so forth and so on. But we have 5 days, Thoughtful Thursday and Feel Better Friday. Our goal just really being to help families continue the social emotional work that we were doing at school. Our teachers also, during their daily 1-hour office hours with our kindergartners, I saw some of them get their bucket out with the palms that we use for acknowledgement, and they were giving kids palms in the bucket virtually. So the kids would earn them and the teacher would put them in. So we just really tried to make it as normal as possible in this very unusual situation. And I was super proud of everything that I saw happening, kind of just because we've put the work in. So it was just really neat to see. And that's about all I have for now.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions or things that they'd like to kind of respond to or talk out loud about with respect to what Erica shared? Those are all really, really great items or really great ideas. I'm still trying to get my email open. If you're trying to send me that item right now, my email isn't opening, but hopefully we can get that. And I know Heidi posted that we'll send a link to all the resources when we're done here today.
I will send those just as soon. I'm not handy at doing two things at once. So as soon as I'm done talking, I will send those.
No problem. I'm in the same boat. I see Leanna commenting she loves the 5-day social emotional calendar, which is great. I think it'll be helpful to see it, but you shared enough that we get the idea.
Yes, and I can share that as well as our remote tricks. Oh, so bug and a wish is terminology that we've taught all of our students. It bugs me when you do blank. I wish you would stop. It's an iMessage in a kindergarten friendly version. So our students also received, they have calm down strategies, posters in all their classrooms. So we sent those home with our first packets, and bug and a wish is one of the strategies on there for them to use their words. So it's just a real simple iMessage, but a fun way for our little ones to remember it.
Okay, anybody have anything else? Oh, how to fill buckets.
So the teachers brought their actual buckets home from the classroom and the students earned palms. So we went over the remote learning expectations, you know, muting mics, waiting your turn, using the little hand raise on Google. And so the teachers started acknowledging students for doing those things. And so they would put palms in, and the palms are just those little fuzzy, cheap pom-poms. And then the teachers would have the kids vote virtually on like something fun they could do in their office hours if they filled their bucket. So we just basically took what we did in the classroom and put it online.
Okay, I was speaking and nobody was hearing me because I was still muted. Sorry about that. Eric, I saw you were watching the chat and you were getting some kudos from your colleagues. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think we're gonna move forward and share from Miller Elementary now and hear from Maria Goodman, the principal.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Goodman. I'm the principal at Miller Elementary, which is also a preschool and kindergarten only building, but I also have the privilege to be the assistant principal at our 345 building. So I do span 2 buildings. But specifically, I'm going to speak about what we utilized at our elementary building, the preschool K building. We have a pretty solid behavior matrix in place for our PBIS framework. And one of the things that I sent out weekly was a parent feedback survey just to kind of hear how things were going. And it became pretty clear that our families needed some extra support in teaching expectations at home. So we kind of pulled things together. We stayed grounded in our big ideas of be respectful, be responsible, and be a problem solver. And then we wrote some skills of the week in order to support families. So I can share as well some of the different learning tools that we sent home to families. And that included a skill of the week that might be, I can be a helper. So our skill of the week would teach the parents that I can be a helper at home and at school. Being a helper is fun, and it means taking care of myself, my family, and my friends. When you are helpful, you look for those who need help and you do something to help them out. Then we also provided a video link for the families so that children could watch what it looks like to be a helper in person, and then an additional parent resource, which was more of an article about teaching your child to be helpful around the house. So we started right at the beginning with making sure that they knew how to teach, prompt, and reinforce the skills that we were looking for. And then we continued our reinforcement system in place, which is what you can see on the screen. This is my weekly newsletter that goes out to families. And we utilize a wall of fame at Miller in our physical brick and mortar space. And on our wall of fame, the students get to sign their name and they get a little warm fuzzy if they are displaying some of our behavior expectations. So we wanted to keep that going because now that we've taught the families how to teach it at home, we wanted to reward the students when they were actually displaying these behaviors within the four walls of their now home learning environment. So in my weekly newsletter to families, I would send out our PBIS virtual wall of fame. And if you could actually click on that link to Miller's virtual wall of fame,
Yep.
our Padlet, and any family member could post to our wall of fame. The pictures will populate in just a minute, so it takes a little bit to load. But we encouraged families to make sure that they send us some pictures of their children being respectful, being responsible, or being a problem solver. And they could tell a story or send a picture. And the teachers had access to react to the different things that the parents were sending along to our wall of fame. Then each week I would put those names in a hat. And back on that original newsletter, you saw some kids getting a little surprise package on their front doorstep. I would go around and I would drive around town and I would drop off prizes just as they would receive a small little prize at school. I reinforced the positive behaviors within their home too. So this went on throughout probably all of April and May, where the families would post things to our wall of fame, and then I would drive around and provide them an opportunity to get a little reward and get to see their faces. So we agree. We found that keeping our behavior matrix in place was key, making sure that we teach, prompt, and reinforce the expected behaviors that kind of arose from family concerns. So this wasn't a predetermined list that we had, but we made sure that we were using feedback from our weekly parent response, and then creating a skill of the week to teach, and then I would drive around and reinforce. It received very positive feedback from the families. The students felt consistent with the same language that we used at school and at home, and it was very user-friendly. It did not take much effort from us at all, and we look forward to making sure that we have some more expectations that we're going to have to hit the ground running with next school year that was different than fourth quarter. So we are already creating our skill of the week, which is already tied to the things that we've taught during the school year in the brick and mortar, but now we're going to shift it if we are virtual. So this is just kind of a simple example of how we kept things going, and it really arose out of the need to support our families during this transition.
Thank you so much, Maria. I'm sure you can see in the chat, and if you haven't yet, you're getting lots of props as well. Lots of good feedback, especially how you're supporting families and relationships. And thank you for sharing these resources so that we could put them up here. And I apologize, Maria, I meant to ask you, did you want me to share the PDFs that you emailed?
It's up to you. If you want to show one of them, then they can see what was sent home to the families as the Teach, Prompt, Reinforce guide of the week.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you as you were talking, and I was like, should I share? So yeah, so let me know.
Yep, you can just scroll down. It's a one-page document that just listed the skill of the week. This one was, I can say please and thank you. And then a little further down, there is a video for the children to watch. And then a little bit further down is a tip. This one might not have had a tip sheet for parents, but we started adding on like a family support guide as well at the bottom of each of these. So
Wondering if this one had a tip guide.
The other one, yep, that one does.
Okay.
Yep, there's an article about ways to encourage your kids to be kind, a video from Sesame Street for the kids to watch, and I believe this one was I don't know what the.
Oh, sorry.
That one's I can be a helper. Yes. We had a variety of them throughout our digital kind of learning time. So they seem to be very helpful for us.
Excellent. These are great. We're getting some questions. Will we share this? Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to send out a follow-up email to all of our participants with a link to the bit.ly. We're working on making sure that you can click on all of the links in the slides. If you can't, we'll send a different, like a PDF version that you can click on. And any of these supplemental resources we'll include in that email as well.
Absolutely. So the preschool and kindergarten staff members were we have a pretty strong PBIS team. So they were the ones who created the Skill of the Week posters. I maintained the PBIS Wall of Fame just because I could make sure that I drive around and I had all the little goodies. And I made sure families knew that it was created with, gloves and mask, and it was up to them if they felt safe accepting a gift from me, but most of the families didn't have a problem with it.
That's fantastic. Okay, so there's already been lots of compliments. I'm just going to give it another couple of seconds to see if anybody has any questions. I see, Steph, did you get your question answered? What is the role of the members of the current PBIS team? Are they creating the Skill of the Week resources?
Yes, Maria just jumped in about her
Okay.
team members, so thank you.
I figured that was covered.
I'm curious as teams share about how much we're asking PBIS team members that are teachers or their staff members to be doing, because so much of this is new. And so I'm just kind of curious how your buildings are handling that. So Maria, it sounds like you've got a rock star team, and I'll be interested as the other teams share or others chime in to see if the experience is the same. So thank you. Very impressive.
The last 3 days of this school year, our teachers and our PBIS team were involved in professional development, and we had a whole breakout session related to PBIS and planning for next year. So we already have a list going of these key competencies that we want to teach, prompt, and reinforce. So then we can kind of get going on some of these learning tools for families and just kind of flip them a little bit to a digital platform.
That's wonderful. You definitely have a head start on next year. Fantastic. Thank you, Maria.
Not a problem. Thank you, everyone.
I'm muted. Okay, I'm muted again. I keep forgetting. Okay, so up next we have some folks from elementary. And next we have Katie Mann from Brunswick City Schools and Memorial Elementary.
Morning. So our PBIS team continued to meet a few times while we were distance learning. Our focus was adjusting our matrix and creating a flow chart and making sure our links and reteaching our teachers some of the expectations. It was just time for a change. Last time we did it was 2015. So we spent some time doing that. But the question about the considerations for family students in the virtual environment, we didn't roll anything out as a PBIS team, but teams of teachers work together to kind of solve problems. So our kindergarten team, they decided to do Zoom meetings, which they had started before our district decided to just do Google Meets. And our kindergarten teachers held parent meetings in the evening to kind of go over expectations, because our kindergarten parents, the feedback we were getting from them, they were very overwhelmed having their 5- and 6-year-old home with them and trying to teach them. They definitely appreciated what our teachers do at school. So it gave them kind of a new sense of what goes on all day in kindergarten. Those meetings also was a time for parents to ask questions. Our kindergarten students, when they were doing the online learning, their parent was usually right next to them or their caregiver. So just kind of going over expectations and teaching our parents how to behave in our Google Meets and our Zoom meetings. All teachers K-5 continue to do community circles. So they started off their meetings after we went over expectations about coming on to the meeting, mute it, and raising their hands using those features. Then they would start with checking in with students to see how everyone was feeling and sharing what was going on. So again, those connections with kids was really important. We have a couple, I have a school counselor that I share with another building. She was able to get into Google Classrooms for grades 3 to 5 and continue her lessons with the kids. And then we have a Guidestone counselor who checked in with her students to continue their meetings. They would normally meet once a week for an hour, and she would also do small social groups. So she continued those meetings with our students. And then she also provided videos that we were able to share with our entire building. how to help kids cope with learning from home, things that would help parents, but also help the kids, things that parents could do together with the kids. They also provided summer resources that I just shared with our families about 2 weeks ago, supports that families may need over the summer. We also had teachers, the Story Flat Stanley, they continued to do a flat teacher. So they took a Bitmoji of their teacher, of themselves, and then they cut it out and either mailed it to students or dropped them off at the students' houses so that the students would have a physical paper copy of the teacher with them. And the teachers, they talked about that then in their Google Meets about, you know, what are you doing with Mrs. Mann today? Or, you know, take me along when you ride your bike, or, you know, put me in your book as you're reading to me. So just again, that connection with our kids is really important. Communication with our families definitely increased. So at school, I have 3 students that I check in and check out with. And so I emailed parents and I was able to check in with those students through Google Meet to make sure that they were doing okay. I didn't check in with them every day because I didn't want to overwhelm them, but I did check in with them weekly. And we had other teachers that continued to meet with their check in and check out students. Together too, as a staff, we would talk at least once a week about kids or families that they weren't hearing from, that they weren't turning in work, or they weren't coming to Google Meets. So they tried to email or call the parents, and then I also called or emailed parents. And so we were able to talk to a lot more families and some parents that were frustrated and overwhelmed. I think just hearing from someone from school to validate how they were feeling and that it was okay to feel overwhelmed, you know, just to take a break. And if it was getting to be too much, it was okay, just put it aside and, you know, try again later. So I think having parents hear that it is okay and that we understand where they're coming from was really important. Also talking to parents on a few Google Meets as well, just them being able to see you, to know that like, it's gonna be okay, we're gonna get through this, helped. Our PTO also posted on their Facebook page. I have a rock star PTO secretary who is fantastic. She pulled all sorts of online resources that she found that could support our parents, virtual field trips that families could do. So if it was stuff to support kids with learning, to support parents with, you know, working from home and also being the virtual teachers, she was posting it and sharing it out. And then teachers and staff, support staff to continue to do positive phone calls and reaching out to our kids and our families. So that's about it in a nutshell, what we have done.
Well, Katie, that's so awesome. I love the fact that I know it wasn't seamless, but it seems like a seamless transition that you guys made. We did have a question. Do you see a connection between the community circles and overall engagement from students? I would imagine it would boost overall engagement and the number of students logging on. Have you seen any connection there?
Yes, because again, it's all about those connections. So those kids really need to see their teacher and their peers, even though it's virtually, just checking in, like starting with how are you doing, or, you know, what have you done, helping them make connections with each other was really important. And yes, our kindergarten students, I would say majority of those kids were engaged. We maybe only had 1 or 2 students in each classroom that wasn't able to meet at that time or wasn't engaged 100%. So our overall participation was really good at our school. And those kids that weren't able to meet, there was a reason, you know, that the parent was working or they were with a grandparent or someone that didn't have the ability to connect. So we just found other ways. We did have a couple families that we needed to do paper copies with, that we delivered. We did make deliveries to families as well.
Wow, what great outreach that is. Well, thank you, Katie, for presenting. Any questions or other compliments for the team? I've been kind of monitoring the chat box there. We've had some questions come in. Anything else for Katie before we move on to our next building? Well, I think you answered the question, Katie. Thank you again. Love the connections, love the restorative circle. Love that you're continuing to do that work remotely and visiting and dropping off stuff for the parents. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So we'll move on to our next and will be our last building presenting to us, and that is our secondary building, which is Streetsboro Middle School. I'm going to throw it to Ashley and or Vince.
Okay, I'm going to start first and have Ashley kind of fill in and kind of pick up for me. But first of all, good morning, everyone. Let's say we're happy to be here. I'm Vincent Suber, principal of Streetsboro Middle School. I had to first start by saying that our team is just great. We have a great team. They work very hard. Mrs. Bahari's here. Like, she's kind of was one of the leaders who kind of took our whole PBS by the horn, just kind of ran with it. So I believe we have a great system in place, and even during these hard times, I believe our team kind of did a great job with that communication. So first off, like I said, even with the first question, what comes to our mind right now with student their behavior is that, again, trying to provide the equity piece. So we were very worried about kind of the social emotional piece of our students. So we did a few things in regards to that. First of all, if a student didn't complete work or turn in online assignments, we were calling. We were calling, and then we always make sure to emphasize we were calling not to collect work, not to scream at kids, but we told them, when you don't complete your work or online assignments, that's a sign to us that something's wrong. That something's wrong. You need something. Do you need a computer? We'll give you one. You need to talk to our counselor. Here's the link for you. So that's the first thing we did. That if we noticed someone not completing work, the first thing we did was made a phone call. Are you okay? What do you need? How can we help you? And so that was beneficial in a few ways, because teachers, parents, students don't want teachers, the principals calling them. But two, they know that we care about them. And again, we're not worried about the work. We're worried about your social, emotional well-being and your health. So that's one thing we emphasize as far as the whole SEL piece. Speaking of SEL, that's one thing we ramped up a lot starting for next year. We actually have a teacher that just specializes in that social emotional learning piece. So we use it's like a sub-curriculum, and she's actually in the process. I wish she was here today. Her name is Miss Andrews. But she's in the process of actually designing this like it's a curriculum and doing that online. So now we'll have another class that every kid will take that involves that social emotional learning piece. So that's one thing we ramped up as well too. We did things like I got board approved policy. We had to have a therapy dog in our building. So as a building, we really ramped up that SEL piece. And like I said, and we're doing connections. We make sure students are okay. We every morning we would send a morning announcement to our students, and there'll be a teacher. Some teachers did were very serious. Again, if you need us, reach out to us. But Mrs. Anchor, our assistant principal, who's on this thread as well, she would be known to do a TikTok dance. I'll be walking around the track. So we had a really fun time with it. And the message was that it's okay. You want to be goofy. It's not always serious. Just make sure you try hard, and that's all we ask of you. So we I think at the building we did a good job. Teachers volunteered. They were silly. We had mad scientists. It was really a fun time. Our students really appreciated the fact that we were sending morning messages, checking on them, and calling them, especially with our community, with our parents. So I think for families and students, that's one thing we did was try to make sure that they were okay. We were being funny. We were being goofy daily in our daily announcements, and I think they really appreciate that. As far as our matrix, so our matrix, our Borough Way, is what we call it. It stands for be responsible, on task, respectful, one. And I think I even heard someone like kind of say that, I believe maybe Stephanie in the beginning saying that, how to treat people, how to treat other people, especially during this time with the coronavirus. So that's one to be emphasized as well. So with our Borough Way, we have our matrix, and we have every area of the building you can imagine. So we have it in the cafeteria. These are the Borough Way procedures in the cafeteria, in the bathroom, in the classroom, everywhere you could possibly think of, we have Borough Way procedures. In our team, our teachers actually created lesson plans for each area. So at the beginning of school, second semester, we go exactly to those areas and show kids exactly how they need to behave. So how they should act, just if you get in a line, you throw a paper towel, whatever the case happened to be. So we did a really good job as far as having just procedures, lesson plans in place. And so what and Mrs. Bahari kind of led the charge with this is that we just added a category to our matrix, and that category was virtual learning. So this is the Borough Way in virtual learning. This is what it looked to be responsible virtually. This is how it looks to be on task virtually. So we created kind of the matrix and added that virtual learning piece onto our matrix for students to use. Now we added this year, so we plan to kind of talk about it over the summer, do some more the next year. But as far as our matrix, we added specifically just digital learning. How do you want it to look? What does it look like if you're responsible online? What does it look like when you're on task? What does it like to be one, to include other people and things like that? And so that's what we're currently working on. But just overall, we done a few things as far as just the SEL piece and just kind of modeling and showing students how we expect them to behave when they're online doing virtual learning. And I want to
So
ask
Vince, we had a question in the chat box. Besides calling, what else did you do for kids who weren't turning in work? And I apologize if I interrupted you.
Well, it was different. So if a kid, the way we did our fourth grade period grading is that we ended our grading period in the third grading period. So basically everything I've done in the fourth grading period was extra credit. So again, we called, we checked them, it didn't complete work. We didn't stress out, we didn't worry about it because we knew it was going to be an extra, just extra credit as far as the grade. So whatever grade they got in the third grading period was going to be their final grade. So if they didn't complete work, we didn't punish them because it wasn't their fault that school was out early. So we didn't punish them and get upset with them, but we did call. And again, we did call, make sure they were okay. And it's, again, and not turning in work. We weren't worried about collecting work. We were worried about them being okay. So for example, you didn't turn in work, and we didn't hear from you, we were sending our school resource officer. Again, not because we're mad upset, because we were worried about you. So as far as about kids not turning in work, we weren't necessarily worried about kids turning in work. So again, we made phone calls, we checked on them, teacher would call first, and then I had the principals would call. And again, we couldn't get a hold of them, then we would go. So again, as far as kids not doing work, our emphasis in Streetsboro was not to collect student work. It was to make sure kids were okay. We just called. We called, we checked them, made sure they were okay. Can you share what yours? Yes, I can share that. It's not, I'm looking at the question to the side. Can you share what are links for the virtual learning? Yes, we share. We're not done yet. We have a few things. Can I share that with somebody and they can kind of put it online for us, kind of what we have so far?
What we're probably going to have to do, unfortunately, in the interest of time,
Okay.
Is if you send that to me or Stephanie, we'll make sure to get all of the resources that you guys have talked about, either in a folder or we'll attach it to the email, and we'll make sure that everybody has all of the resources and all of the examples that you guys are sharing.
Gotcha. Okay.
I do see Ashley adding some comments in the chat box to give some examples, which is great.
Well, can she talk? Can Ms. Bahari talk? Because she's the one that really took a hold of this. So can she say a few words as well?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Ashley.
Hi, I teach 8th grade math. I just have to say our administration really focused on that social emotional learning piece, and it was kind of refreshing. We were able to do things where we maintained relationships, and I think that was just our entire focus the fourth quarter. So like 6th grade, they usually go to Mohegan. What they did was they had a virtual campfire. They had over 100 participants where kids were just having their own campfires. The teachers had their campfires and they were all there together. So little things like that, just to, we talk about the Borough way, the BORO, the last one is one. We talk about being Borough strong. So that one piece was just having everybody kind of come together and just that we're all still there for each other.
All right. Any other questions or compliments for the Streetsboro Middle School team? We'll give it a minute. There's a lot of bravo and kudos on the chat. Ashley put some great examples there as well. And again, we will share with you the examples that the schools are talking about. We'll put that in a follow-up email. We'll make sure that you guys have access to that. Well, Ashley and Vince, thank you so much. You guys have done a lot of work in the middle school with PBIS, and I love the fact that you've, again, made the transition. I think all of our educators have done such a fabulous job making that transition in no time flat and trying to adapt to totally new environment. So thank you very much. Oh, Stephanie says she's sad she missed the virtual campfire. That's her kind of camping. Probably mine too. All right, so let's thank you, Streetsboro Middle, and thank you all the presenters for all of the great examples that you've shared with us. Today, we're gonna kind of move on to finish up and respect everyone's time. We have a couple more things for you this morning. The first thing is a list of, I would call briefs or informational sheets regarding what to do either during this time of COVID outbreak or what to do during remote or virtual instruction. All of the links that you see there are through pbis.org. I think they have done a wonderful job being responsive and quick regarding trying to address the needs that they're seeing in an immediate fashion. So everything there is some sort of brief or information sheet that you can use to think about what you can do to address remote instruction. Some of them will talk about family engagement. Some of them will talk about just how to get through the outbreak. There is an example of how to use a teaching matrix for remote instruction. And there are some tips for families trying to implement the framework at home. So those are all really, really great. As I said, in addition to that, which is from the National Center of PBIS.org, we will also be sending those local examples. I know Maria has already shared some things that I can send in the email. Vince, if you can go ahead and send us that example that someone wanted to see, I'll make sure that that is also included in the email. And from our other two buildings, if there's anything else that you guys would want to share, if you just send an email to me, I will make sure that I attach all of that in the email, or we'll create a folder with all of that information for you. As we move on, what we would like you to do to encourage a little bit of participation is take a look at one of those or more of those resources, and we're going to give you just a minute to do that. And then in the chat box, please just list one resource that you think that you would share with your staff that might be something that you would find as a good resource. So what's one resource that you're likely to share with your staff? So take a minute to click on a couple of those resources. And in the chat box, which one might you share with the staff? And once we do this little activity, we're going to kind of finish up with a poll and a thank you for today. So I'll stop talking and give you a minute to do that. Thank you for those of you who are populating the chat box with the resources that you think that you might choose to use. As you guys are doing this, I know that there was some question about things being able to be clickable as far as links. We will go back and double check all of that to make sure that when we send this out, everything is up to date. I know we were making some last minute changes and that may have affected the accessibility of the links. So we'll make sure that we fix those. I see a lot of folks talking about using some of the home instruction briefs. The PBIS matrix for virtual learning, people are talking about tips for families. Parents, again, doing the virtual matrix, I see a lot of all that being helpful for folks. So we have a couple minutes left. So as you guys are continuing to populate the chat box, if you do that, I'm going to ask Janine to go ahead and initiate the slide. Thank you. We have a poll that we're going to put up in a second. The poll is going to be asking what you guys need, let's say at the beginning of school next year or fall. We weren't sure if this topic would be something that folks needed right now. I think by the amount of participation that we received today, I think it was something that many people were interested in, which we're really glad that it's going to fit that need. But we would like to know what is on your mind for next fall. What kind of things are you guys thinking about as far as support? At the SST, our support is probably going to be changing, the type of support or the way in which we give support. So we really would like to hear from you guys what you think that you need. We have given some multiple choice examples and answers that we would like you to click on, and click on as many as you think. I think you can click on more than one. What do you need more of for the fall? What would you like more of? If there is something that is not listed, please put that in the chat so we know that that's a need for you. So I'll give you a minute to do that.
Thanks, Heidi. I do see responses coming in, so that's great. When we are ready to conclude the poll, we will share the responses back so that you all can see just sort of what the thoughts are from the field. Okay, we've got about 70% who have participated so far. So we're going to give it another 30 seconds.
Thanks, Janine.
Sure. Heidi, are you able to see the poll too?
Yep, I can see it.
It's exciting to see the data coming in real time.
I know. That's because we're data nerds, Janine.
We are. We are. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'm going to show you the results. If you didn't get a chance to vote, we'll make sure that we put some of those ideas in our email so that you can just give us some additional thoughts if you didn't get a chance to share. We had about 78% participation, which is pretty good. So let me share with you the results.
Ooh.
Looks like supporting families with behavior was the winner, although we had a lot of interest in tier 2 support and remote, as well as mental health supports, which is no surprise.
Right.
But a fair amount of interest in other things. Let's see here. And then there's some ideas in the chat. Let's see, especially interested in tier 2-3 supports and mental health resources. How to really support students who don't have adequate support at home so that the educational gap does not widen. That is the question of our time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And Katie had voiced an idea for virtual connections for students. I think that's just she's sharing some ideas there. I really like that. Have this year's teachers invite next year's teachers so students can see their next grade level teachers. I think anything that can help with sort of continuity when everything is so unfamiliar is really, really helpful. So
really important. And I know Stephanie has said there are many districts and schools that are considering looping just for that reason, because trying to get to a new group of students in the fall is probably going to be much harder than looping with the kids that you had from the previous year. So I think that's a really good idea too.
Definitely.
Okay, so
back everybody.
I think we are finishing up with a quote: do something today that is your future, that your future self will thank you for. We want to remind you guys that you cannot pour from an empty vessel, which means you must take care of yourselves to be able to take care of your families and your students at school. So please today, your homework from this webinar is to do something nice for yourself, even if it's only 5 or 10 minutes. Please take care of yourselves, because we know that we're already seeing the mental health need as being isolated and separated. We really want you to do something nice for yourself today. That is your homework to do. And I think we will end with our end slide saying thank you and staying well. Again, I am going to ask if there are folks that presented today that are going to want to share some resources, please send those to me or Stephanie, and she'll make sure to get them to me. And we, again, will follow up with a link to this recording as well as a link to the resources shared. Thank you to the presenters, and I know we are over by 4 minutes, and I apologize for that, but I did want to, again, thank you for the presenters for doing such a wonderful job. And thanks for those of you who joined us today. We are going to continue to reach out in webinar format to try to meet the needs that we're seeing in the schools. If nobody else has any final thoughts from our team, I'm going to assume that you don't. We'll say goodbye, and hopefully you will have a wonderful summer, and we will see you again in the fall, refreshed and renewed.